Greetings, good morning, and welcome to Mind the Moment. This, my friends, is our coffee house in the cloud, a place for us to gather, to build community, to get centered, and explore this present moment. It is July 10th, 2020, which our friends in the UK have deemed Don't Step on a Bee Day, a day to recognize and respect the importance of the humble bumblebee or honeybee to our ecosystem. The Nobel Prize-winning writer Maurice Maeterlinck stated in 1901 that if the bee disappeared off the face of the earth, man would have only 4 years left to live. And while this may be a bit of an overstatement, it is worth contemplating the complicated web of natural mechanisms that must take place in order for even a single blueberry or a single cherry to reach our palm, and how removing any one of those mechanisms would leave us like a person trying to knit a sweater without any needles. We can also honor the bee for what its behavior can teach us. The ancient text known as the Dhammapada, for example, says, "In the village, a sage should go about like a bee, which, not harming flower, color, or scent, flies off with the nectar." A few thousand years later, the naturalist John Muir echoed the sentiment, suggesting that a person should handle a book as a bee does a flower, extract its sweetness, but do not damage it. We might say this is not only a good way to handle a book, but to handle every encounter we have with every person in our lives, not to mention every bee. I am John Roberts from Harvard Pilgrim Health Care's mindfulness program, and I am abuzz with excitement to be minding the moment this morning with none other than Tara Healey, the founder and director of our program. Good morning, Tara.
Good morning, John, and good morning, everyone.
So in just one moment, I will hand things over to Tara to lead us into and then lead us in a 10-minute guided meditation. From there, we'll do some Q&A and wrap things up before 9 a.m. At the bottom of your screen, you may have noticed the option to open up a chat box. Please use that chat box to type in any questions or comments that you might have. We'd love to hear what's on your mind this morning. Speaking of which, Tara, is there anything that you'd like to ask the folks at home to comment on as we're getting started?
Yeah, no, I just to check in. How is everybody doing this morning? How are you feeling? As we get ready to head into the weekend, what's going on?
So while folks are typing, I'd like to issue a big thank you to everyone for taking the time to be with us and with each other this morning. Please keep in mind that if you happen to come across a bee that appears to be struggling in the heat, you can revive it by feeding it a few drops of water mixed with sugar. Also, please note that only Tara and I will be able to see anything that you type, and if we don't read your particular question or comment out loud, please know that we do read and appreciate them all. And before we close up, point out some other ways that you can keep in touch with us too. Tara, can I ask how you're feeling this morning?
Yeah, I slept well last night, and you know how you feel when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I actually had a good night's sleep. So I feel, prepared for the day ahead, and I was able to get a run in early this morning before it got too hot. So I feel like I'm starting off pretty well.
All right, very good. So I got some folks saying, ooh, someone feels hot and muggy. Yeah, I get that. Little agitation, taking the opportunity to settle, anxious, feeling fulfilled and included. Excellent. Yeah, okay, great. Well, I think it's a good way to launch us here. Tara, let me turn it over to you to get us going.
That sounds great. So this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to launch right into about a 10-minute, give or take a little bit, meditation, and then it'll be followed up by Q&A, some questions that we've been collecting that we haven't necessarily gotten to. So I am going to go ahead and get us started in a practice. So some of you may be new to joining us and others may be regulars, but we're going to go ahead and settle into either a seated or a standing posture. So I just want everyone to know that it's absolutely fine to do a standing meditation. If you're standing, you want to stand in a relaxed way, yet upright. Sitting, the same thing. So relaxed, upright, and engaged with a spine that is straight but not stiff. If it feels comfortable, you can gently close the eyes. It's also fine to keep the eyes open, yet gaze downward just a little bit to help remove peripheral distraction. So making any necessary micro movements in the body for comfort, for ease, and at the same time, engagement, alertness, uprightness. There's a kind of ardor to the way you're holding yourself. And with a lens of awareness over your whole body, just kind of notice the physical expression from your activity so far this morning. So perhaps aware of a subtle or not so subtle pulsing or vibration, a tingling, temperature. What's the physical expressions occurring in the body? And also aware of thought. We can include thought in the sense realm. You may notice the points of contact with the body and the surface. So it could be the soles of the feet or all along the back of the body and the connection with the surface. Just those subtle touch points, becoming aware of those. Let's begin to widen the sense of awareness into sound, sound in the room or perhaps outside of the room. With a receptive attitude in the mind. So no need to label what's making it, but just simply hearing. See if you can rest your attention on sound. And finally, let's begin to bring the sense of awareness back inward with sound remaining in the background. No need to exclude anything. Coming back to the whole body. And beginning to narrow the focus a bit on the sensations that you notice when you breathe. So allowing the body to breathe all on its own. And whatever rhythm the body is offering, just see if you can connect in with where the sensation is strongest when you inhale and when you exhale. It could be the belly, the chest, the nostrils, or just an overall sense of whole body breathing in, whole body breathing out. Allowing awareness to track the sensation of the in-breath and the out-breath at that one spot in the body that's most accessible, where you feel the breath the strongest. Anytime the attention is pulled off the breath by an itch or a sound, always release attention from the breath. There's no need to struggle with it. Just simply release and go to that sensation, whether it's a cramp or an itch, or go to hearing that sound and hang with that. Stay with that for a bit. When you feel ready, return to breath sensation, either whole body or that more narrow focus. Noticing where the mind is, gently releasing thought, memory, planning. Soften the body and return to your anchor. Noticing where the mind is, softening the body, and returning to breath sensation. In just a moment, I'll have us return to the room and slowly open our eyes. Settling in, another minute or so. And as you feel ready, if your eyes were closed, you can gently open the eyes and otherwise re-engage with the room and each other.
All right, thank you, Tara. So for everyone watching at home right now, I want to make sure that you feel very welcome and encouraged to ask Tara questions using the chat box. While you think and type, I will get us started by asking Tara one or two questions of my own.
Great.
So
Yeah.
Tara, you and I and our colleague Jackie Johnson recently had a chance to produce some mindfulness trainings for a group that was curious about the correct way to introduce mindfulness into an organizational environment. So this actually reminded me of something that the late American author Sue Hubble wrote in her book, A Book of Bees, about beekeeping. Hubble suggested that one type of beekeeper will do certain things that seem good from a human standpoint, but which involve radically disrupting the hive, while another type of beekeeper will spend time observing the bees, trying to figure out their unique biology and behavior in order to create the conditions that will make them happy before leaving them alone as much as possible. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on whether it makes more sense to introduce mindfulness to an organization through a kind of radical disruption, like from the top, or instead introducing it through smaller, perhaps subtler interventions.
Yeah, so I mean, John, my philosophy all along has been through smaller, subtler interventions. And I have always felt like large-scale collective change happens one individual at a time, ultimately then can produce large-scale change. So yeah, I mean, I think that at least for me and for us and for our program, I've always advocated starting small and not at all starting leadership down. But just kind of going at it. And if leaders are involved, that's great. And I actually think it's helpful to have some champions at the very top of an organization. So I wouldn't, that is actually, it can be vital. And it all depends on the company culture too. So I think, realistically, it's learning a little bit about the culture of the organization and in dialogue, helping them understand our philosophy and approach and trying to find something that fits for both.
So just to play a little devil's advocate here, I mean, what about somebody who says, well, if you're introducing it like one person at a time, isn't that just going to take generations? Or, I mean, will you ever actually enact any change that way?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's so many variables, John. It's that it's hard to answer that question, but I would say yes, because I have seen, in fact, people who might never otherwise be interested in mindfulness coming to classes purely because colleagues they value and trusted have encouraged them, and then it having a profound impact on their life. So, but doing it the other way, and especially, if it's required, to me, it sets up a really bad environment. It doesn't set up encouragement. It sets up resistance.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing you saying is this idea of people who might already be apt to resist, it will just sort of inflame their resisting urges if they feel
definitely.
like it's being
Yes.
pressed down on them. Very good. So yes, what somebody in the chat box wrote, it's so important to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
So I think that's
I agree.
All right, so let me kind of switch gears a little bit. Something else that you and I were kind of chatting about before we started this morning. So let me set this up a bit. So I was listening to a story on the NPR show All Things Considered this past week, which happened to be about Frugal Bookstore in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. So Frugal Bookstore is a Black-owned business that has as its motto, changing minds one book at a time. And the story was about how local, small, Black-owned bookstores were becoming overwhelmed with orders for books about race and systemic racism. And yet we're finding that customers were canceling the orders they had made once they found out that they would actually have to wait for the books that they were requesting. So this drove home something to me. You're probably getting this as well. The fact that our best intentions can very easily be interrupted by the shadow of inconvenience. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how mindfulness might help us make that move from intention to commitment, and then to sticking with that commitment, even when things get difficult.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, I think in a part, what you're pointing to is white comfort, and not wanting, and the discomfort with the example you gave, John, is that we're so used to having things at our fingertips. I mean, even drones dropping things off in your driveway, like, within hours of ordering. And I think, it has become a habit pattern to order and expect immediate, right? And I think, mindfulness can offer us this really incredible opportunity to see the impulse that we've been cultivating to get what we want when we want it, so to see that impulse, to use the practice to actually tap into, I'm canceling this order, or, because I can't get it as soon as I would like to get it. And yet see, what does that feel like when you can't get something? Can you feel it physically, and also become aware of the stories and the thoughts around it with an attitude of curiosity and interest? And the more that we can kind of resist that impulse, the more we strengthen that aspect of mind. So like whatever we incline the mind toward, we train. So if we're training towards certain impulses, like getting something right away, then we're going to expect that. But the more we start to see with clarity, there's that thing again. I'm leaning into wanting to get it tomorrow, so I'm going to cancel. What about if I think about this in a broader perspective, that I am supporting a Black-owned bookstore, and I actually have to wait, can I work with patience? Like, what does it feel like to be impatient? And so you're just bringing the lens of awareness to the whole experience. And the more you practice, the more you see those impulses. Like if you're not aware of how the mind and body is working, those impulses just keep right on going. But all of us here are doing this work together. And the more we practice, the more we see the impulse before we take the action.
Yeah, I'm really connecting to this idea of these habit patterns towards, let's say, convenience, and the fact that I have certainly set up my life on my computer in such a way to stop myself from thinking about my consuming choices. For example, it's like, I have my Amazon account set up. It has my password, saved in it. So like I could go from wanting something to having it on its way to me in a drone within probably 30 seconds, right?
Right.
And then to have to slice that 30 seconds into moments of attentiveness is very difficult. But as you say, all the more important for being difficult. And then the more I do manage to insert some mindfulness into the process, the easier it will become to do so in the future.
And test it out. Like, that's the thing, that's the beauty of this practice. Test it out for yourself.
Yeah, great. All right, so this is we're kind of doing you and I were talking about this as like kind of a grab bag of questions. So there's so I apologize for any like sharp pivots. But so we are, Tara, as you are very aware, approaching the hottest days of summer. Something we're often called the dog days of summer. Something
Yeah.
even the ancient Romans knew as dies caniculares, and which Homer wrote of in the Iliad in the following lines. Sirius rises late in the dark liquid sky on summer nights. Star of stars, Orion's dog they call it, brightest of all, but an evil portent, bringing heat and fevers to suffering humanity. Is there a way for mindfulness to help us navigate these more difficult parts of summer, the sometimes oppressive heat, feeling perhaps that we may not necessarily be in the place where we would like to be, or even in the moment in time that we would like to be in?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna tell everybody just a quick story which has really stayed with me. I was on a retreat, and it was a monastic retreat. It was taught by two nuns, and one of the nuns, for a very large part of her life, her earlier life, she was married and worked in the hotel industry, and she was traveling on a train in Burma or Myanmar, and all of a sudden, and it was brutally hot, like brutally. She really emphasized that. And no air conditioning in the train. And they stopped, and a group of monks got in and sat down, and they were completely unperturbed by the heat. Everybody else around was like in agony. I mean, you could literally see it. And it really caught her attention as these monks entered the train and as they sat down completely unperturbed. And she, at that point, thought, there must be something they're doing that's helping them be with this. And, the bottom line is, one of the supports of this practice of mindfulness meditation is that it helps us be with things that are both pleasant and unpleasant. The pleasant things are much easier for us to be with. The downside of things that are pleasant and good and feel good is that we usually don't want them to go away. So we kind of hold on to them a little bit. It's much harder to be with things that are difficult. And to the question, you're talking about heat, and how do we manage through, especially if you don't have air conditioning, which I don't, how do we manage through this unpleasantness? And in part, you can bring this practice to bear on the resistance in your mind and body to what is actually happening. So when we resist what is happening, we're adding an extra layer of hardship or angst. So you have hot days, heat, sweating, and it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant. Can we actually get curious about the unpleasantness? Like, where is it showing up for you? Where is the heat manifesting? Is it possible to kind of go toward it with curiosity and interest, as opposed to adding the layers of, this is awful, I can't stand it, when's it gonna break? All of the things we might do that are resistance oriented, and then really trying our best to get comfortable. Now, it is wise action to get comfortable, to try to have some degree of comfort, but that's going to be limited depending on your circumstances. So maybe there's a way to relate to it with less resistance and more ease and acceptance. So, yeah.
Well, yes, somebody around the chat box had to read this a couple times. Sweat meditation, and this actually makes a lot of sense to me. I was taking a run this morning, and it was pretty hot out, and
Yeah.
I was getting really annoyed because I could just like feel the sweat going down my temples, and then at some point I was just like, I'm just gonna pay attention to the feeling of this, as opposed to just feeling scandalized by the fact that it was happening to me. And it was not a pleasant feeling per se, but it was, I was like, well, there's a lot more to this feeling than I thought. It's a lot more than merely unpleasantness. And also remembering that it was my body trying to help me, trying to help me cool down.
And maybe unpleasantness is just unpleasantness. You know what I mean? Like, it's just unpleasant. Like, oh, this is what unpleasantness feels like. So And it takes practice. It takes practice. And
Yeah,
I'm not there. I mean, I have my moments. And I am deeply grateful when I can catch resistance to anything, that's happening in my life that I wish wasn't. We'll always have things we wish we didn't, or we'll want things we can't have. And is there a willingness for me as soon as I see that I'm caught in it? Because I can be caught in it for a while before seeing it. As soon as I see it, now I have this opportunity to engage with it in a very different way. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
You can chat.
Well, people
you
are.
Let me know.
While they're absorbing, I wanted to let folks know that we're really appreciating all the responses to our Show Us Your Meditation Sweet Spot Challenge, and we've even asked some of our instructors to get involved as well. So our friend Kel Juilliard actually sent us 2 pictures of where he likes to meditate, and I'm going to show you both of them. I like these because one is the chair and one is the cushion, and this actually is a nice illustration of the fact that, it's okay to have different meditation positions. Sometimes you're going to want to be on the cushion. Sometimes you're just going to want to be in the chair, and both positions are okay. This is from Zinat Potia, and Zinat is actually going to be with us on Tuesday, and I really love the color scheme here. And I also feel like I think I lived in that apartment when I first moved to Boston, actually. There's something about those Boston apartments.
It's such a Boston apartment.
I know, right? So we'd love to have you keep the pictures coming. We want to see where you're meditating this summer. Where's your meditation sweet spot? So please feel free to post a picture to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/mindthemoment. Or you can send the pictures directly to us at askmtm@harvardpilgrim.org. Please feel free to submit more than one. We know your meditation sweet spot may change day to day depending on where you are, where your travels are taking you. You can also leave questions for Tara or other experts. We will pass them along and get them answered. You can even leave a voicemail at my desk number if you care to at 617-509-7047. Meanwhile, we will be back with you every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can find the links to these sessions and other resources at our main site at harvardpilgrim.org/mindfulness. And finally, you can rewatch this session, older sessions, and introductory sessions featuring Ms. Tara Healey on our YouTube page. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not offer us a bit of closing verse from Emily Dickinson, who wrote, "To make a prairie, it takes a clover and one bee, one clover and a bee, and reverie. The reverie alone will do, if bees are few." Tara, I'm grateful to you for bringing not only your teaching to us this morning, but also your practice and also the quality of mind that glues them together. Sometimes one's quality of mind can be enough. I'm wondering if you might leave us with one resource that you think people might find especially useful.
Yes, and I'm also going to say that that Fridays, usually I would kick it off with a little teach piece, but we're actually going to be doing more of a Q&A format on Fridays. So we really invite all of you to come with your questions, and we'll just kind of do a dialogue back and forth. And my resource is Mindful of Race by Ruth King. So I would say if you are interested, she is a wonderful teacher, and this is a great book.
So purchase it from your local Black-owned bookstore if you can. And in the meantime, thank you everyone for joining us today. Great to see you. Hope to see you soon. Have a momentous day. All right,
Thanks,
bye,
everybody.